Today I'm going to show you how to create this input form with this animated button inside of HTML and CSS. And as you can see, you can type your username in, your password, so everything works as expected. So we'll start, instead of our index.html, we linked our style shield by using the link tag. And right here, we are now going to create a form field. We give our form a class of form-card. And inside of this form field, we will now have a paragraph that says log in, for example. Right below, we are going to have an input field of type text that will be for the username. ID will be username. Placeholder will be username, for example. Now we can duplicate this field and we can say that the second input field is of type password. Name will be password. ID will be password. Placeholder will also be password. We will also create a label for both of these fields. So we'll say label for username. Label name is username or label text. We are going to copy this label and put it right above our second input field. And this one is for our password. And the label will be password, like so. And right below, we are going to create a button of type submit to submit our form. And this button will have a class of btn, for example. And the text could be submit, for example. Now our form card will get a background, so we'll say dot form card. Also inside of our body, we just have a width, a height, and a background color defined. And if you want to use the exact same background, I'm using a linear gradient from this color essentially to this color. So feel free to copy the values if you want to use the exact same ones. Now we'll say our dot form card will have a background that is just black, but we will change this one slightly. So we'll say it's probably some dark gray, like so. We will have a maximum width of, let's say, 400 pixels. And let's go to 450. And let's say we are also going to add some padding of 40 pixels into every single direction. Border minus radius of 20 pixels, for example. Let's also add a box minus shadow of 5 pixels into the X direction. Let's say 20 pixels into the Y direction, 20 pixels of blur, and RGBA of 0.6. So we get this shadow effect, and let's maybe only use 10 pixels for the Y offset. The color can maybe be slightly brighter. So let's use 26, 26, 26. Let's also start to style our class form header. So let's go ahead, copy that one, and let's say our dot form header has text align of center, color of white. Let's give our entire body a font minus family of system minus UI. So we get a nice font family. Now let's say font weight is equal to bold. Our font size is equal to 2 rem, but maybe we need to use even more. So maybe 2.5 rem. But I think 2 rem is fine for now. Let's start to style our input fields by saying those ones have a class of form minus input. And we are going to copy this class and give the same class for our second input field. Let's say our dot form minus input class will get a width of 100%, padding top bottom of maybe 10 pixels. Let's say left right of 5 pixels, for example. We want to have a background that is essentially transparent. We want to have a border top of 0, border left of 0. For the border bottom, we are going to use 1 pixel solid, and let's just test this gradient color, or this color that we've used for the gradient up there. We're going to save this, and I think this doesn't really look too good. So what we're going to do is we're going to experiment a little bit. We're also going to try 2 pixels right here, and we're going to use this color right here. So we'll also say border, or we are just going to duplicate this line, and now we will replace border bottom with border right, so we get the same color to the right. Now we are actually going to remove the placeholder. That was my bad. So let's remove them, and let's start to style our labels. So let's give our labels a color by giving them a class as well. So those ones will have the class of form minus label. We're going to copy this class, and we will give the same class to our second label. Now we are going to copy this class name, and inside of our style sheet again, we say dot form label. right here we want to define a color. So color is equal to, let's maybe use a pretty nice color. So let's start with blue, but obviously this looks terrible. So we'll use some blue that looks kind of nice. So actually I think this one looks pretty good. So now let's say we want to have a display of flags for those fields, a flags direction of column, and let's say our width should be 80% by default, up to a max width of 450 pixels. Now we want to use a gap between those items. So let's use gap of 10 pixels, for example. And now I'm also going to group our label and our input inside of a div so that the spacing is properly. And I'm going to do the exact same thing for this div right here. So now we get some proper spacing, and maybe I'm going to increase the gap to 20 pixels so we get a proper gap. Also for our form input, I'm going to use a background as well, and this background will be very, very similar to the card background, but I'm going to make this slightly brighter. So I will say 28 right here, for example, 28 right here, and 28 right here. So the difference is like really subtle, but you can see a difference. I also say this one should have a margin top of maybe 5 pixels. So we have a little bit of spacing between our username as well as our password and our input field. And now we need to style our submit button, so our button. So let's say dot button. Our button is going to have a background color that is essentially this background color right here. So the background color of our input form. Let's say the color is white, the border is 0, the width is fit content, we have padding of maybe 10 pixels top bottom and 40 pixels left right. And for the color, let's actually use the same color that we've used for those input elements. So we're going to copy this one, so for our form labels, and we're going to paste in the same color. Now we are going to say font weight is equal to bold, font size is equal to 1.1 rem, for example. So now this is a little bit bigger. And what we're going to do now, we're going to say dot btn colon after. And now I'm going to say that I want to have a content that is equal to an empty string. Display should be block. I want to have a position of absolute. This means that our button needs a position of relative. Now I'm going to say the background color is basically the color that we've used right here, like so. I will use inset of 0 to create essentially 0 top, 0 left, 0 right, 0 top right. And now I'm going to say that I want to create a z minus index of -1, for example, or let's say I'm going to use 1 for this one, but I'm going to use essentially 2 for our button. And now I think it makes a little more sense to use a div right here and put this button inside of a div, and we say that this div has a class of button minus container, for example, because it might make more sense to apply the style to the div. Now we're going to say dot button container will have a position of relative, like so. We will say that the set index for our button is 1 and the set index for our button after element is -1, or let's say -2 essentially. And now we'll use a set index for our form card of maybe -1. So this one is in between. And now as you can see, our button element has a position of absolute to our button container. So we'll say that this one will have a width of fit content. And now we won't see our button element anymore, but it's right behind our button. So what we can do to fix that is we can say that we want to have a set index of, let's try -2 pixels, for example. And as you can see, now this works. Let's maybe only use, -2 pixels is fine. But now as you can see, this is like just a border. So nothing we really want to have. And instead of this normal background, we are now going to use a conic minus gradient, like so. And now we can define different colors. So for the first color, let's define blue, for example. Now let's take the RGB that we've used for our background, so for our card background, and let's put it in here. And as you can see, now half of this is basically having this conic background, and the other half is having the normal background of our card, or it's slowly fading into the background of our card. So let's add 2 parts of this background essentially. So now we get this effect, as you can see. And now we could actually even add one more of those. So now we get even a better transition. And obviously you can use as many as you wanted to. So you could also say, okay, let's add another part of blue, for example. So now you would get this effect and so on. So feel free to be creative with this. But yeah, I think it works like this, for example. But obviously this is like not really animated yet. So in order to do so, we have to animate it. And now we are going to use a variable to animate this. So we will say from var dash dash angle. So we will create the variable angle essentially. Now we'll say add property dash dash angle. We'll say that the syntax is angle. The initial minus value will be 0 degrees. And for the angle, we actually need those brackets right here. And we have to use those semicolons at the end. And now we'll also say inherits is equal to false, like so. And now we need to animate this angle property. So we are going to say add keyframes identifier is going to be rotate, for example. Now we'll say from 0%, we will go to 360%, so to 100%. And from 0% to 100%, we want to animate our dash dash angle property from essentially 0 degrees to our dash dash angle property to 360 degrees. And now we can use this rotate animation for our button after element. So let's say animation is equal to rotate, duration could be 4 seconds, timing function does not really matter too much, but we are going to say linear, delay 0, iteration count infinite, directional fill mode doesn't matter, so we can delete this. And as you can see, now we get this effect, but maybe it's cooler if we make it a little bit faster, like so. And now we get this effect. Also, I would like to have more margin to the top for our button, so I will say margin, or let's give the entire container this margin, which is probably a little bit smarter. Margin top 60 pixels. And I actually think we can even use 80 pixels, and now we have this effect. Essentially, we also need to change the set index to 1 to make our form inputs clickable. And now we could also change the color of our elements. So let's go to our form input and let's say color is equal to white. And now we have this effect essentially. We can also change the outline to 0 or to none if we wanted to, like so. So now this outline is gone. as well. And essentially this leaves us with this input form.